The locked door hid a secret so dark, it chilled even Hercule Poirot to his core. Welcome to Hercule Poirot wished it didn't lurk behind the locked door, a tale of twists and shadows that will keep you guessing. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and enjoy the story. If it captivates you, hit that subscribe button. Your support means a lot to us. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackwood Manor Inn, the misty autumn of 1935. The rain-slicked streets of London buzzed with the usual clamour of taxis and hurried pedestrians. But for Hercule Poirot, the day began with an unexpected envelope sealed in black wax. It arrived at his flat on Whitehaven Street just as he was savouring his morning chocolate and croissants, the kind that flaked just so under his precise fingers. Poirot, with his impeccable moustache waxed to perfection and his eyes sharp as a detective's scalpel, eyed the missive with mild curiosity. The handwriting was elegant, almost too refined, belonging to Lord Reginald Blackwood, a name Poirot recognised from society pages, wealthy industrialist, collector of rare antiquities, and now, apparently, in need of his services. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured to himself, slicing open the envelope with a silver letter opener. What puzzle does this bring to my door? The letter was brief, but laced with urgency. Lord Blackwood invited Poirot to his secluded estate, Blackwood Manor, nestled in the fog-shrouded hills of the English countryside. There had been, it claimed, a series of unsettling incidents, whispers in empty rooms, objects moved without touch, and now a locked door in the east wing that no one could open, yet something inside seemed to stir as if alive. I require your unique talents, Monsieur Poirot, the letter read. Not for murder, but for madness that threatens my household. Poirot leaned back in his velvet armchair, twirling the end of his moustache. He was no stranger to the eerie. His cases had unravelled poisons in teacups and alibis forged in shadows. But this, it sounded like the stuff of ghost stories, the kind Captain Hastings would regale him with over brandy. Still, Poirot's little grey cells tingled with interest. He penned a swift reply, accepting the invitation for the following evening. By train and chauffeured motorcar, Poirot arrived at Blackwood Manor as dusk painted the sky in bruised purples. The estate loomed like a Gothic sentinel, its stone facade etched with ivy that clung like desperate fingers. Towers pierced the clouds, and gargoyles leered from the eaves, their stone eyes following his every step. The butler, a gaunt man named Jenkins with a face like weathered parchment, greeted him at the grand oak doors. Monsieur Poirot, his lordship awaits in the drawing-room, Jenkins intoned, his voice a dry rattle. As they traversed the echoing halls, lined with portraits of stern ancestors, whose eyes seemed to track the visitor, Poirot noted the details. Persian rugs muffled their footsteps, crystal chandeliers flickered with gaslight, and a faint chill hung in the air, unrelated to the autumn draught. Lord Reginald Blackwood rose from a high-backed chair by the roaring fire, a tall figure in his 50s, with silver hair and a face marked by worry lines that deepened when he shook Poirot's hand. "Thank you for coming so promptly," Blackwood said, gesturing to a seat opposite. His voice carried the clipped tones of old money, but there was a tremor beneath it. "I've heard of your successes, the Orient Express, Styles Court. If anyone can solve this affliction, it's you." Poirot inclined his head, accepting a glass of sherry. "Explain to me, my lord, this door that locks away your peace. Begin at the beginning, if you please." Blackwood sighed, staring into the flames. The manor had been in his family for generations, built in the 1700s on land once rumoured to be cursed by gypsies after a land dispute. But superstitions were for the weak-minded, he insisted, until the incident started 3 months prior. It began innocently enough, a vase in the library toppling at midnight, though no wind stirred the curtains. Then, footsteps echoing from unoccupied bedrooms, soft and deliberate, like someone pacing in stocking feet. Servants whispered of cold spots where breath fogged the air, and one maid, young Eliza, swore she saw a figure in white gliding down the corridor. Blackwood dismissed it as hysteria at first, but then came the locked door. In the east wing, behind a heavy oak panel reinforced with iron bands, lay a forgotten study, sealed since his grandfather's time. No key existed, or so they thought, until a locksmith confirmed the lock was intact, unpickable without destruction. Yet noises emanated from within, scratches like nails on wood, muffled thumps, and once a low moan that raised the hairs on every neck in the house. Poirot listened intently, his eyes half closed in that way that made others underestimate him. And these sounds, in what pattern do they occur? He probed. Blackwood described them as nocturnal, peaking around 2 in the morning, always from that room. No one dared force the door, fearing what might lie beyond, perhaps a trapped animal, or worse, evidence of some family shame buried with the past. Poirot nodded, sipping his sherry. Fear is the lock's true guardian, no? But we shall see. Dinner was served in the opulent dining hall, where crystal gleamed and silverware chimed like tiny bells. Around the table sat the household. Lady Eleanor Blackwood, Reginald's wife, a poised woman in her 40s with pearls at her throat and unease in her eyes. Their son, young Theodore, a lanky Oxford student home for the break, who fidgeted with his napkin and avoided the East Wing talk. Miss Clara Voss, the governess to Theodore's younger sister, away at school, thankfully. A sharp-featured woman in her 30s who observed Poirot with keen interest. And Dr. Harlan Graves, the family physician, a burly man with a moustache, rivaling Poirot's own, invited to calm frayed nerves. Conversation flowed like the Bordeaux wine, but undercurrents swirled. Lady Eleanor spoke of the manor's history, how her husband's grandfather, Elias Blackwood, had locked away his most prized possession in that study, a collection of occult artifacts from his travels in Egypt and India. He was obsessed, she said softly, her fork pausing mid-air. Books on alchemy, amulets said to ward off evil, or summon it. Theodore scoffed, calling it nonsense, but his knuckles whitened on his glass. Miss Voss added that the servants were restless. 2 had already given notice, citing nightmares of shadows with eyes. Dr. Graves chuckled, attributing it to draughts and imagination, but Poirot caught the doctor's glance toward the east wing door, visible through an archway. A massive slab, of oak, banded in iron, standing sentinel at the hall's end. After dinner, as the party retired, Poirot requested a tour of the manor. Jenkins led him through labyrinthine passages, past suits of armour that clanked faintly in the draughts, and tapestries depicting ancient battles where blood seemed to stain the threads. The east wing was colder, the air thicker, as if the house held its breath. There stood the door, unyielding, its keyhole staring like a blind eye. Poirot pressed his ear to the wood, listening. Silence, for now, but he felt it, a subtle vibration, like a heartbeat. Poirot retired to his guest room, a lavish chamber with a 4-poster bed and a view of the moonlit gardens. But sleep evaded him. As the clock struck 2, a sound pierced the quiet. A scrape, faint but insistent, from the direction of the east. Wing. He rose, slipping into his dressing gown, and padded down the hall. The manor was still, save for that noise, now joined by a thud, like something heavy shifting. At the door, Poirot examined it closely under the dim lantern light. No signs of tampering, no draughts seeping through. Yet the wood felt warm, unnaturally so. He knocked sharply. "Who is there?" he called in his precise accent. Silence. Then a whisper, indistinct, but carrying a word. "Leave." The detective's pulse quickened, but his mind raced ahead. Was this a hoax? A family secret clawing its way out? Or something more sinister, lurking as the title suggested? He returned to his room, notebook in hand, jotting notes. Suspects, motives, possibilities. Lord Blackwood's finances were strained. Whispers of lost investments. Lady Eleanor's distant cousin had been cut from the will. Theodore's wild parties at university hinted at debts. Miss Voss's background was vague, perhaps too perfect. Dr. Graves prescribed tonics freely. Opium, perhaps. And the door. It was the key, pun intended. Dawn broke grey and drizzling, and Poirot joined the household for breakfast. Tension simmered. No one mentioned the night's sounds, but dark circles ringed their eyes. "Today, we investigate," Poirot announced over eggs and kippers. "Interviews, examinations, order from chaos." Lord Blackwood agreed, relief flickering in his gaze. As the morning unfolded, Poirot began with Jenkins, who recounted the manor's lore. Elias Blackwood's death in that very study, found slumped over his desk with a look of terror, door locked from inside. Suicide, ruled the coroner, but rumours persisted of foul play, or worse, a pact with the occult. Next, Lady Eleanor in the conservatory, amid blooming orchids that filled the air with cloying sweetness. She confessed her fear. The manor felt alive since the incidents, watching them. Reginald dismisses it, but I hear the whispers too. Names, accusations. Poirot probed gently. Had she tried the door? No, but once a handprint appeared on the glass pane beside it, smeared as if from within, vanishing by morning. Poirot's interest peaked. Ectoplasm or sleight of hand. Theodore was evasive in the billiard room, cue in hand, missing shots. "It's all bunk, governor. Probably rats." But Poirot noted the boy's trembling hands, fear or guilt. Miss Voss in the library was more forthcoming. She'd found an old journal in the attic, Elias's, detailing rituals to bind spirits. He believed the artifacts held power, cursed power. Dr. Graves in his study laughed it off. Mass hysteria. I'll examine the lot for nerves. But Poirot saw the doctor's locked cabinet, filled with vials, poisons among the remedies. By luncheon, Poirot had pieced a preliminary web, motives tangled like the ivy's grip. Financial ruin could drive Blackwood to stage hauntings for insurance, Eleanor to expose a hidden heir, Theodore to cover scandals, Voss to unearth treasures, Graves to peddle cures, but the door remained the enigma. That afternoon, with the locksmith's tools, they attempted to pick it, futile, the lock jammed as if alive, springs twisting back. As night fell again, the sounds resumed. Scratches, thumps, now laughter, cold, echoing mirth. Poirot gathered them in the drawing room, fire crackling. "This is no ghost," he declared, "but a human hand pulls the strings. Tomorrow, We delve deeper. As they dispersed, he lingered, staring toward the east wing. Whatever lurked behind that door, Poirot wished, for once, it would stay hidden. But his duty called, and the little grey cells demanded truth. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Library. The morning mist clung to Blackwood Manor like a shroud, curling around the stone turrets as Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his polished shoes sinking into the plush crimson rug. The room was a cavern of knowledge, its towering shelves stuffed with leather-bound tomes, their spines cracked from age. A chandelier hung overhead, its crystals catching the weak sunlight filtering through tall, arched windows. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the space, noting the faint dust on untouched shelves and a single book askew, as if hastily replaced. He had declared the previous night that a human hand orchestrated the manor's disturbances, and today he sought evidence, starting here where Miss Clara Voss had mentioned finding Elias Blackwood's journal. Poirot began with the attic's contents, which Clara had described. She led him to a corner where a crate of papers sat, covered by a tarp. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed over the journal, a slim volume bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed and smelling of mildew. "I found it last month," she said, her voice low, as if the books themselves might overhear. Elias wrote of things, unnatural things. Poirot flipped through the pages, his gloved fingers careful. The entries were erratic, penned in a hurried scrawl, notes on rituals, sketches of amulets, and repeated mentions of a guardian tied to the locked study. One phrase stood out, underlined twice. "It watches from within." "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, fixing her with a steady gaze, "why did you not show this to Lord Blackwood?" Clara's eyes darted away. "He'd think me fanciful, or worse, dismiss me." Leaving Clara to her duties, Poirot moved to the shelves, running a finger along the spines. He sought volumes on the occult, suspecting Elias's obsession might hold clues. A heavy tome, Arcana Mundi, caught his eye, its cover embossed with a serpent eating its tail. Inside, passages on summoning spirits were bookmarked with a ribbon, recently tied, judging by its unfaded silk. Someone in the household was curious, or meddling. As he replaced the book, a faint creak came from the far end of the library. Poirot froze, ears straining. The sound wasn't footsteps, but a slow, deliberate slide, like wood shifting against wood. He moved silently toward it, past a bust of Plato glaring from a pedestal. Behind a bookcase, he found a hidden panel, slightly ajar. With a gentle push, it revealed a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, his heart quickening. A secret passage in a manner like this was no surprise, but its proximity to the east wing, and the locked door, stirred his suspicions. He descended, lantern in hand, the air growing colder with each step. The passage ended at a stone wall, but a faint outline suggested another door, sealed shut, its edges marked with strange carvings. Symbols like those in Elias's journal, angular and unsettling. Poirot traced them, feeling a hum under his fingertips, as if the stone pulsed faintly. Back in the library, he summoned Jenkins, who paled at the mention of the passage. "Old servants' tunnels, sir," the butler stammered. "Long forgotten. Used in the 1700s for discreet matters." Poirot raised an eyebrow. Discreet or secret? Jenkins offered no more, excusing himself to tend to luncheon. Poirot's Next interview was with Theodore, found lounging in the conservatory, sketching idly in a notebook. The young man's nonchalance was forced. His pencil trembled as he doodled a spiral eerily like the carvings below. "Heard you poking around, monsieur," Theodore said, smirking. "Find any ghosts yet?" Poirot smiled thinly. "Ghosts? Non. But secrets, those are plentiful." Theodore claimed ignorance of the passage, but admitted sneaking into the library at night to read adventure novels, not occult texts. Yet his sketchbook held more than doodles. A map of the manor's east wing, with the locked door circled. "Just curiosity," he muttered when pressed. Poirot noted the boy's flushed cheeks and moved on to Lady Eleanor, who was pruning roses in the garden. Her hands, gloved in white lace, shook as she snipped a stem too short. "The library," she said, frowning. "I avoid it. Too many memories of Elias's ravings." She described her late father-in-law pacing there, muttering, about a debt to something beyond the veil. When Poirot mentioned the passage, her eyes widened briefly before she masked it with a laugh. "Old houses have old tricks." Dr. Graves was last, found in his temporary study, mixing a tonic for Lady Eleanor's nerves. His jovial demeanour faltered when Poirot mentioned the carvings. "Superstition," he scoffed, but his fingers tightened on a vial. Elias was unhinged, collecting trinkets he thought held power, probably drove himself mad. Poirot nodded, noting the doctor's locked cabinet again, its key now missing from the chain Graves had worn yesterday. As evening fell, Poirot returned to the library alone, the journal under his arm. He sat by a flickering lamp, piecing together fragments. Elias's entries grew frantic near his death, describing a ritual gone wrong, a binding that trapped something in the study. "It demands release," he wrote. Poirot's logic rebelled. Spirits were not his domain, but the passage, the carvings, the noises pointed to a truth cloaked in shadow. He tested the hidden panel again, finding it locked now, though he hadn't heard it click shut earlier. Someone was watching his moves. Dinner was tense, the household avoiding the East Wing's mention. Poirot observed. Clara's gaze lingered on Theodore, who avoided her eyes. Lady Eleanor dropped her fork twice. Graves drank more wine than usual. Blackwood stared at the chandelier as if it might fall. After, Poirot lingered in the hall near the locked door. At precisely 2 a.m., the noises began again. Scratches, now sharper, like claws on bone, followed by a voice, clearer this time, female, pleading, "Open it!" Poirot pressed his ear to the wood, heart pounding. No human could be inside. The room had no other entrance, no windows. Yet the voice felt real, urgent. He gathered the household at dawn, their faces drawn from sleeplessness. "This manor hides more than dust," he announced in the drawing room, firelight casting long shadows. "The library holds secrets, passages, journals, truths. But someone among you knows more than they say." Eyes darted, Clara to the floor, Theodore to the window, Eleanor to her husband, Graves to his watch. Blackwood cleared his throat. "What now, Poirot?" The detective tapped his temple. "We follow the threads, the passage, the carvings, the voice. They lead somewhere. Tomorrow we unravel more." As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, staring at the East Wing's door across the hall. The manor seemed to breathe, its walls closing in. Whatever lurked behind that door was no mere trick, and Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with a question. Was the danger human, or something he dared not name? Chapter 3. The carvings speak. The morning sun barely pierced the heavy clouds over Blackwood Manor, casting a pale glow through the stained glass windows of the east wing corridor. Hercule Poirot stood before the locked door, its iron bands gleaming dully under his lantern's light. The carvings he'd glimpsed in the hidden passage haunted his thoughts, angular symbols that seemed to writhe when he stared too long. Today he resolved to decode them, believing they held the key to the manor's unrest. His polished shoes echoed on the stone floor as he paced, notebook in hand, sketching the patterns from memory. Spirals, jagged lines, a crescent moon bisected by a dagger. "These are not mere decorations," he murmured, his moustache twitching. "They tell a story, no?" Poirot began his day by summoning an expert, Mr. Alistair Finch, a local historian and antiquarian recommended by Lord Blackwood. Finch arrived. By midday, a wiry man with spectacles perched on a hawkish nose, clutching a satchel stuffed with reference books. In the drawing room, over tea served in bone china, Finch examined Poirot's sketches. "These are old," he said, voice tinged with unease. "Pre-Christian, likely Druidic, mixed with something foreign. Egyptian, perhaps." He pointed to the crescent moon. "This symbol, it's tied to rituals of containment, locking something away." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Containment of what, monsieur?" Finch hesitated, adjusting his glasses. "Spirits, energies, or worse." Elias Blackwood was rumoured to dabble in such things. Leaving Finch to his books, Poirot turned to the household, starting with Miss Clara Voss. He found her in the nursery, organising lesson plans for the absent young Blackwood daughter. Her composure faltered when he showed her the sketched symbols. "I've seen these," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "In Elias's journal, but also on a pendant he wore, in an old portrait." She led Poirot to the portrait gallery, where Elias Blackwood's likeness stared down, stern and hollow-eyed, a silver pendant at his throat etched with the crescent dagger symbol. "He never took it off," Clara said. "They buried him with it." Poirot noted her pallor, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Was she frightened or hiding something? Next, he sought Theodore in the stables, where the young man brushed a sleek chestnut mare, his movements agitated. "Symbols? Sounds like rot," Theodore scoffed, but his eyes flicked to Poirot's notebook. When pressed, he admitted sneaking into the east wing as a boy, daring himself to touch the locked door. Felt wrong, like the air was thick. Never went back. Poirot observed the boy's clenched jaw, sensing fear beneath the bravado. Could Theodore know more about the carvings? Purpose? Lady Eleanor was in the music room, her fingers stumbling over a melancholy Chopin prelude on the grand piano. She froze when Poirot mentioned the symbols. "Elias carved them himself," she said, her voice tight. "He spent hours in that study, muttering about protection, warding off something he'd brought back from Egypt." She described a crate of artifacts arriving in 1880, shortly before Elias's death. Statues, scrolls, a black stone tablet inscribed with similar symbols. "Reginald burned most of it after the funeral," she added. "But the tablet, it's still in the manor, somewhere." Poirot's pulse quickened. A physical clue, perhaps. Dr. Graves was less forthcoming, found in the greenhouse examining herbs for his tonics. "Carvings? Poppycock," he grunted, snipping rosemary with unnecessary force. But when Poirot described the crescent moon, Graves's hand paused. "Elias rambled about curses. Said he'd angered something by taking that tablet. Load of nonsense." Yet Poirot caught a flicker of doubt in the doctor's eyes, and the locked cabinet in his study came to mind. Could it hold the tablet? By afternoon, Poirot returned to the East Wing, armed with Finch's translations. The symbols, Finch explained, formed a warning. Bound within, never released. The carvings encircled the door like a seal, suggesting whatever Elias feared was meant to stay locked inside. Poirot tested the door again, pressing his palm to the wood. It was cold now, unlike the warm pulse he'd felt before. He tapped the symbols in sequence, half expecting a reaction, but the door remained unyielding. As he worked, Jenkins appeared, silent as a shadow. "You're stirring things, sir," the butler warned. "The noises were louder last night, screams almost." Poirot fixed him with a stare. "And you, Jenkins, what do you believe is behind this door?" The butler's lips thinned. "Something that don't belong here." Dinner was a strained affair. The household seated around the long mahogany table, silverware clinking like nervous ticks. Poirot watched them, Clara avoiding Theodore's gaze, Eleanor staring into her soup, Graves gripping his wineglass, Blackwood carving his roast with too much force. He chose not to mention the carvings yet, letting the tension simmer. After dessert, he slipped into the East Wing alone, lantern casting jagged shadows. At the door, he traced the symbols again, whispering their meanings as Finch had explained. A low hum vibrated through the wood, faint but undeniable, followed by a sharp crack, like stone splitting. Poirot stepped back, heart racing. The sound wasn't from the door but above, in the ceiling. Dust trickled down, and a faint outline appeared. A trapdoor, hidden in the ornate plaster. He fetched a ladder from Jenkins, who watched with wide eyes, and climbed to inspect it. The trapdoor was locked, but its hinges bore the same crescent dagger symbol. "Another secret," Poirot muttered, descending. He needed tools, perhaps dynamite, to breach it, but that would wait. The manor was alive with clues, and he sensed the household closing ranks. At midnight, the noises returned, louder, more frantic, scratches morphing into bangs, the female voice now a wail. "Let me out!" Poirot stood in the corridor, notebook open, jotting the rhythm of the sounds. They weren't random, a pattern, almost musical, like a code. He knocked on the door, mimicking the rhythm. The noises stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed against his ears. Then, a whisper, close, as if lips hovered by his ear. "You see too much." He whirled, lantern swinging, but the corridor was empty. Back in his room, Poirot locked his door, a rare precaution. He pored over his notes, the carvings, the tablet, the trapdoor, the voice. Each pointed to Elias's obsession, but also to someone in the present manipulating events. Clara's journal knowledge, Theodore's map, Eleanor's tablet, Graves's cabinet, Jenkins' warnings, all threads in a web. The manor's secrets were layered, and the carvings were a map to something buried deep. By dawn, Poirot gathered the household in the parlour, his expression calm but eyes blazing. "The carvings speak of containment," he said, holding up his sketches. "Something was sealed here by Elias Blackwood, and someone wishes it to remain so, or to be freed. Tomorrow we search for this tablet and open the trapdoor." Murmurs rippled through the group, faces pale, eyes darting. Blackwood nodded grimly. "Do what you must, Poirot." As they scattered, Poirot lingered, gazing at the East Wing's silhouette against the rising sun. The manor held its breath, but the truth was stirring, and Poirot feared what it might reveal. Chapter 4. The Hunt for the Tablet. The dawn light filtered through Blackwood Manor's heavy curtains, casting long shadows across the parquet floors, as Hercule Poirot sipped his morning chocolate in the dining room. His mind was a whirl of connections, the carving's warning, the hidden trapdoor, the voice that seemed to know him. Today, he resolved to find the black stone tablet Lady Eleanor had mentioned, believing it might unlock the manor's secrets. His polished cane tapped rhythmically as he rose, his green eyes scanning the room for signs of the household's unease. Spilled coffee, untouched toast, a newspaper folded too neatly. "The truth hides in plain sight," he murmured, adjusting his lapel pin. "But first, we hunt." Poirot began in the attic, a sprawling maze of trunks and cobwebs under the manor's slanted roof. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, piercing cracked skylights. He enlisted Jenkins, whose reluctance was palpable, his bony hands clutching a lantern as if it were a shield. "The tablet, Jenkins," Poirot said, opening a trunk filled with moth-eaten linens. "Lady Eleanor said it was kept after Elias's death. Where might it be?" Jenkins muttered about storage rooms and forgotten relics, leading Poirot to a corner piled with crates marked with faded labels. Cairo, 1879, Bombay, 1880. One crate, smaller than the rest, bore the crescent dagger symbol etched into its lid. Poirot's pulse quickened as he pried it open, revealing only broken pottery and a faded silk scarf. "No tablet," he said, frowning. "But someone has been here. Recently." The dust was disturbed, footprints smudged in a hasty retreat. Next, Poirot questioned Lord Blackwood in his study, a room lined with hunting trophies and leather armchairs. Blackwood stood by a globe, spinning it absently. "The tablet. I burned most of Father's nonsense," he said, voice gruff. "If it's here, try the cellar. Old junk ends up there." His eyes avoided Poirot's, lingering on a locked desk drawer. Poirot noted it, suspecting Blackwood knew more than he admitted. He thanked him and moved to Clara Voss, found dusting books in the library. Her sharp features tightened when he mentioned the tablet. "I saw it once, years ago, in a locked case in the cellar," she said. "Black stone, heavy, with those carvings. I thought it was just decor." Her tone was too casual, her fingers lingering on a book spine. Was she deflecting? The cellar was Poirot's next stop, a damp labyrinth beneath the manor, its stone, walls slick with moisture. Jenkins lit the way, his lantern casting eerie flickers on barrels and crates. The air smelled of earth and decay, and Poirot's handkerchief pressed to his nose did little to mask it. They found the case Clara described, a glass-fronted cabinet, empty, its lock broken. "Stolen," Jenkins whispered, crossing himself. Poirot examined the cabinet, noting scratches around the lock, fresh and deliberate. "Not stolen," he corrected. "Moved by someone who knew its value." He scanned the cellar, spotting a trail of scuffed dirt leading to a shadowed alcove. There, behind a stack of wine crates, was a burlap sack, heavy and lumpy. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was the tablet. Black as obsidian, its surface etched with the same symbols as the door and trapdoor, glowing faintly under the lantern's light. Poirot carried the tablet to the drawing room, placing it on a table under the chandelier's glow. The household gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. "This," Poirot announced, "is what Elias Blackwood feared." The tablet's carvings told a story, he explained, based on Finch's translations, A ritual to bind a force, a guardian to protect the manor, but at a cost. Elias believed he trapped something, Poirot said, tapping the stone. And someone here wants it freed or hidden. Lady Eleanor gasped, clutching her pearls. Theodore stared at the floor. Clara's eyes flicked to the tablet, then away. Graves snorted, but his hand shook. Blackwood's jaw tightened. Poirot watched them all, his little grey cells cataloguing reactions. After lunch, Poirot took the tablet to Finch, who waited in the library with his books. The historian's eyes widened as he traced the carvings. "This is no mere relic," he said, voice low. "It's a seal, meant to hold something in the spirit realm. Breaking it could unleash whatever Elias bound." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Was the tablet the key to the locked door, or a decoy? He returned it to the drawing room, locking it in a cabinet for safety, but not before noticing a faint warmth in the stone, like a living pulse. That evening, Poirot interviewed Dr. Graves in his study, the air thick with the scent of medicinal herbs. "You dismissed Elias's fears," Poirot said, leaning forward, "yet you recognize the tablet's symbols." Graves shrugged, polishing a syringe. "Seen them in books. Doesn't mean I believe in curses." But Poirot spotted a notebook on the desk, open to a page sketching the crescent dagger symbol. "Research, Doctor?" Poirot asked. Graves snapped the book shut. "Idle curiosity." Poirot left, unconvinced, noting the cabinet's key was back on Graves's chain. At midnight, the noises from the east wing erupted. Louder, more violent, like a storm trapped in wood. Bangs shook the door, followed by a scream, sharp and human. Poirot rushed to the corridor, finding the household already there, robes clutched tightly, faces pale. The tablet, still in the drawing room, hummed faintly when Poirot checked it, as if responding to the chaos. He knocked on the locked door, using the rhythm he'd noted before. The noises paused, then resumed, a voice now clear. "The key is blood." Poirot stepped back, his mind whirling. Blood? A metaphor, or something darker? He gathered the household at breakfast, the tablet on the table like an accusation. "This stone connects to the door," he said, voice steady. "And someone here knows how. Tomorrow, we explore the trap door and test this key of blood." Murmurs of protest rose. Eleanor's voice shrill, Theodore's defiant, Clara's silent, Graves's dismissive, Blackwood's resigned. Poirot held up a hand. "Denial serves no one. The manor speaks, and we must listen." As they dispersed, he lingered, watching the east wing's door from afar. The tablet's warmth, the voice's demand, the carving's warning. They wove a net tightening around the truth. Poirot felt the manor's pulse quicken, and he wondered if the next clue would bring answers or doom. Chapter 5. The Trapdoor's Secret. The morning air in Blackwood Manor hung heavy, thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth seeping through ancient walls. Hercule Poirot stood in the east wing corridor, his eyes fixed on the ceiling's trapdoor, its crescent dagger symbol etched like a silent challenge. The black stone tablet, now locked in the drawing-room cabinet, pulsed in his memory, its warmth and the voice's cryptic demand. The key is blood, gnawing at his logic. Today, he would breach the trapdoor, certain it hid a piece of the manor's dark puzzle. His cane clicked against the stone floor as he summoned Jenkins, who arrived with a toolbox, his gaunt face etched with dread. "We open it, monsieur," Poirot said firmly. "The truth waits above." Jenkins fetched a ladder, positioning it under the trapdoor's outline. Poirot climbed, his movements precise despite the ladder's creak. The lock was old, rusted, but the carvings gleamed as if freshly cut. Using a crowbar from Jenkins, Poirot pried at the edges, the wood groaning in protest. With a snap, the trapdoor yielded, revealing a dark, narrow shaft leading to a hidden attic. Dust swirled as he raised his lantern, illuminating beams draped in cobwebs and a floor strewn with papers. "Stay below, Jenkins," Poirot instructed, ascending alone. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of decayed wood and something metallic. Blood, perhaps. The attic was small, cluttered with relics. A cracked mirror, a child's rocking horse, a chest with brass fittings. Poirot's eyes caught on a pile of letters, tied with twine. Their ink faded but legible. They were from Elias Blackwood to an unnamed correspondent, dated 1880, the year of his death. "The ritual failed," one read. "The guardian is bound, but its anger grows. Blood seals the pact." Poirot's pulse quickened. The voice's words echoed here, suggesting a ritual tied to the tablet and door. He tucked the letters into his coat, then noticed a faint outline in the floorboards. A second trapdoor, smaller, its edges marked with the same symbols. It was nailed shut, the nails bent as if hammered in haste. Descending, Poirot summoned Lord Blackwood to the corridor. "These letters," he said, showing one, "speak of a pact. What did your father hide?" Blackwood's face paled, his hands clenching. He was mad, obsessed with the occult. I burned his notes to end the madness. But his eyes flicked to the trapdoor, betraying knowledge. Poirot pressed further, but Blackwood retreated, muttering about business in town. Suspicious, Poirot turned to Clara Voss, found in the garden, sketching flowers with a tense grip. "The attic letters," he said, showing her a page. "You knew of them?" Clara nodded, eyes downcast. "I found some when I found the journal. They scared me. Talk of sacrifices, blood offerings." Her voice wavered, but her sketchbook held a drawing of the tablet, precise and recent. Theodore was next, lounging in the billiard room, cue in hand. He scoffed at the letters. Grandfather's, ravings, probably drunk on absinthe, but Poirot noticed a bandage on Theodore's hand, fresh, the edge stained red. "An injury, monsieur?" Poirot asked. Theodore shrugged. "Cut myself shaving." The lie was thin, and Poirot filed it away. Lady Eleanor, in the conservatory, trembled when shown the letters. "Elias spoke of a debt," she whispered. "He said the manor demanded payment for its protection." Her eyes darted to the east wing, and Poirot sensed her fear was not just of ghosts. Dr. Graves, in his study, dismissed the letters as delirium scribbled by a fool. But when Poirot mentioned the second trapdoor, Graves' pipe nearly fell from his mouth. "Another attic? Nonsense," he said, too quickly. Chapter 6. The Blood Key. The morning light struggled through Blackwood Manor's thick drapes, casting a sickly pallor over the dining room where Hercule Poirot sat, his fingers tracing the silver dagger's crescent moon etching. The blade, found in the hidden attic's altar, felt heavier today, its dried blood a silent accusation. The voice from the locked door, "Blood opens the way," echoed in his mind, urging him to test the ritual Elias Blackwood's letters described. His little grey cells buzzed, piecing together the tablet's warmth, the altar's stains, and the household's guarded glances. Today, he murmured, adjusting his tie, we confront the manor's heart. Poirot began in the East Wing corridor, the dagger in his pocket and the black stone tablet under his arm, retrieved from the drawing-room cabinet. He stood before the locked door, its carvings seeming to pulse under his gaze. Jenkins hovered, nearby, clutching a broom like a talisman. "Monsieur Jenkins," Poirot said, "fetch me a bowl and a cloth." The butler obeyed, returning with a silver basin and a linen square, his eyes wide. Poirot examined the door's keyhole, noting a faint red stain around it, barely visible in the dim light. "Blood, perhaps," he said, half to himself. He pricked his finger with the dagger's tip, letting a single drop fall into the basin. "A test," he explained to Jenkins, "to see if the voice speaks truth." Nothing happened. The door remained silent, unyielding. Poirot frowned, wiping his finger. "Too simple, no?" He summoned Clara Voss to the corridor, her sharp face pale as she approached. "Mademoiselle, you know the journal's rituals. What does 'blood opens the way' mean?" Clara hesitated, twisting her hands. "Elias wrote of a willing sacrifice, a drop given freely, not forced." Her voice trembled, and Poirot noted her glance at the dagger as if it burned her. He asked her to try, but she refused, backing away. "I won't tempt it," she whispered, fleeing to the library. Theodore was next, found in the smoking room, puffing a cigarette with unsteady hands. His bandage was gone, revealing a fresh cut across his palm. "Clumsy with a knife," he muttered when Poirot raised an eyebrow. "The blood key," Poirot pressed, showing the dagger. "Have you tried it?" Theodore laughed, a hollow sound. "I'm not mad like grandfather. That door's just stuck." But his eyes lingered on the tablet, and Poirot sensed a lie in his bravado. He moved on to Lady Eleanor in the parlour, embroidering a rose with trembling fingers. "Blood rituals," she gasped, dropping her needle. "Elias spoke of such things, but I thought them ravings." She admitted seeing bloodstains near the door years ago, cleaned by servants before dawn. "Whose blood?" Poirot asked. She shook her head, lips tight. Dr. Graves was in the greenhouse, tending a wilting fern. His jovial mask slipped when Poirot mentioned the blood key. "Superstition," he scoffed, but his hand strayed to his pocket, where the cabinet key now hung. "You've handled blood, Doctor," Poirot said, eyeing the syringe on the table. "Any from this household?" Graves bristled. "I treat ailments, not curses." Yet Poirot noticed a vial in the greenhouse, labelled only with a crescent symbol, its contents dark and viscous. By noon, Poirot gathered the household in the East Wing, the tablet and dagger on a table beside the locked door. "The ritual demands blood," he said, voice steady. "A drop, given willingly, may unlock this mystery." He held the dagger, offering it to each in turn. Blackwood, back, from town, shook his head, face ashen. "I'll not play Elias's games." Eleanor clutched her shawl, refusing. Theodore smirked, but his hand stayed bandaged. Clara stared at the floor, silent. Graves laughed, but it rang false. Jenkins, unasked, stepped back, muttering a prayer. Poirot sighed, placing the dagger down. "Then I must try again." That afternoon, he consulted Alistair Finch, who arrived with more books, his spectacles fogging with excitement. In the library, Finch studied the tablet and dagger, cross-referencing Elias's letters. "The ritual requires intent," he said, voice low. "Blood from someone tied to the manor's history. Blackwood blood, perhaps. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Lord Blackwood, or Theodore, then? Finch nodded, adding, "But the guardian Elias bound. It may demand more than a drop if the seal weakens." Poirot filed this away, his mind racing. A family sacrifice. At dusk, Poirot returned to the door alone, the tablet under his arm, the dagger in hand. He pricked his finger again, this time smearing the blood on the keyhole's rim, whispering, "Open the way." A low groan echoed from the wood, and the carvings glowed faintly, then faded. The door stayed locked, but a thud sounded above, from the trapdoor attic. Poirot climbed the ladder, finding the altar's candles lit, their flames unnaturally still. A fresh bloodstain marred the stone slab, wet and gleaming. "Someone has been here," he whispered, heart pounding. Dinner was a silent ordeal, the household avoiding the East Wing's mention. Poirot watched. Clara's hands shook as she cut her meat. Theodore's bandage was fresh again. Eleanor stared into her wine. Graves's pipe stayed unlit. Blackwood's fork scraped his plate rhythmically, like a countdown. After, Poirot cornered, Jenkins in the hall. "The blood on the altar. Who?" Jenkins's eyes darted. "I saw Master Theodore near the East Wing last night, sir. Looked guilty." Poirot nodded, his suspicions sharpening. At 2 a.m., the noises erupted. Screams, thuds, a chant like a dirge. Poirot stood by the door, dagger in hand, tablet at his feet. The voice was louder, anguished. "Blood of the line!" He tapped the rhythm, then smeared another drop on the keyhole. The door shuddered, its lock clicking once, then stopping. A cold wind swept the corridor, snuffing his lantern. In the darkness, a whisper brushed his ear. "Not yours." Poirot froze, alone but not alone. At dawn, he gathered the household in the drawing room, the tablet and dagger before them. "The ritual points to Blackwood blood," he said, eyes scanning their faces. "Someone has tried it, recently." Theodore flinched. Blackwood's jaw tightened. Eleanor gasped. Clara stared at the tablet. Graves gripped his chair. "Tomorrow," Poirot declared, "we confront the altar and the blood source. The manor demands truth." As they dispersed, he lingered. The door. Chapter 7. The altar's demand. The morning fog wrapped Blackwood Manor in a ghostly embrace, muffling the world beyond its stone walls. Hercule Poirot stood in the East Wing corridor, the silver dagger in his pocket and the black stone tablet now a constant weight under his arm. The fresh bloodstain on the attic altar haunted him, as did the voices' cry. "Blood of the line." His little grey cells churned, linking Theodore's bandaged hand, the tablet's pulse, and the door's shuddering lock. Today, he would confront the altar directly, seeking the source of the blood and the ritual's true cost. His moustache twitched as he adjusted his hat. "The manor plays its game," he murmured, "but Poirot plays to win." He began in the hidden attic, climbing the ladder to the trapdoor with Jenkins trailing, his lantern trembling. The altar's candles were cold now, their wax hardened in eerie swirls, but the bloodstain gleamed wet, as if freshly spilled. Poirot knelt, examining it with a magnifying glass. "Human," he said, noting its consistency. "And recent. Hours, not days." Jenkins crossed himself, muttering about curses. Poirot ignored him, inspecting the altar's stone slab. Faint grooves ran beneath the stain, forming a spiral like the carvings on the door. He pressed the dagger's tip to the groove, and a faint hum vibrated through the blade, as if the altar recognized it. "This is no mere table," Poirot said, standing. "It demands something." Descending, he sought Theodore, found in the garden, tossing pebbles into a fountain. The young man's bandage was gone, his palm now scabbed but raw. "Another cut, monsieur?" Poirot asked, showing the dagger. Theodore's smirk faltered. "Clumsy, like I said." But when Poirot mentioned the altar's blood, Theodore's eyes widened. "I wasn't up there," he snapped too quickly. Poirot pressed. "Your blood, perhaps? The voice calls for Blackwood blood." Theodore turned away, muttering about nonsense, but his hands shook as he lit a cigarette. Next, Poirot found Lady Eleanor in the music room, her fingers idle on the piano keys. "The altar," he said, describing the stain. "It ties to Elias's ritual. Have you seen Theodore?" "Near the east wing." Her face paled, and she nodded. "Last night, he was pacing there, looking haunted." She admitted finding a bloody cloth in the laundry, hidden among Theodore's shirts. "I thought it was an accident," she whispered. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A mother's denial or complicity? Lord Blackwood was in his study, poring over ledgers. "The altar?" he growled when Poirot questioned him. "Father's madness, nothing more, but when shown a sketch of the spiral groove, his hand froze on a pen. I saw that pattern in his papers, before I burned them." He claimed ignorance of Theodore's actions, but admitted his son had been reckless lately, borrowing money from unsavoury lenders. Poirot noted the locked drawer again, wondering what it hid. Clara Voss was in the nursery, folding linens with precise movements. "The altar's blood," Poirot said, watching her closely. "You knew of the rituals. Have you seen blood before?" Clara's hands paused. "Once, in the east wing, a smear on the floor. I thought it was paint." Her voice was steady, but her eyes flicked to the tablet under Poirot's arm, as if it called to her. He pressed further, but she deflected, claiming duty called. "Doctor." Graves, in his study, was mixing a tonic when Poirot arrived. The vial with the crescent symbol was gone, replaced by a bottle of laudanum. "Blood on the altar?" Graves chuckled, but his eyes were wary. "Sounds like a prank." "Theodore's. Fond of those." Poirot mentioned the vial, and Graves's smile vanished. "Just medicine," he said, turning away. Poirot glimpsed a journal on the desk, open to a page about blood rituals, quickly closed when Graves noticed his gaze. By afternoon, Poirot returned to the attic with Alistair Finch, who carried a tome on ancient rites. The historian examined the altar, tracing the spiral groove. "This is a channel," Finch said, voice hushed, "for blood, to complete the binding, or break it." He warned that Blackwood blood, as the voice demanded, might strengthen the seal or unleash what Elias trapped. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Theodore's cuts, the bloody cloth, the ritual's specificity. Someone was testing the altar's power. At dusk, Poirot gathered the household in the east wing, the tablet and dagger on a table, the altar's trapdoor open above. "The blood is Blackwood's," he said, eyes on Theodore. "Someone has fed the altar, but why?" Theodore flushed, stammering denial. Eleanor clutched her husband's arm. Clara stared at the floor. Graves coughed, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Blackwood's face was stone. Tonight, Poirot continued, we watch the East Wing. No one moves alone. Murmurs of protest rose, but he silenced them with a raised hand. The truth bleeds out, mes amis. At midnight, Poirot stationed, himself in the corridor, lantern dimmed, the dagger ready. The noises began, bangs, screams, a low chant like a heartbeat. The voice wailed, "Blood of the line, now!" Poirot crept to the trapdoor, climbing silently. In the attic, a figure knelt by the altar, hooded in a cloak, pouring a vial of dark liquid into the spiral groove. The tablet, left on the table, below, hummed loudly, its carvings glowing. Poirot stepped forward, lantern raised. "Show yourself!" The figure froze, then fled, dropping the vial, empty, with the crescent symbol. Poirot gave chase. But the figure vanished down a side passage, the trapdoor slamming shut. At dawn, he gathered the household, the vial on the table beside the tablet and dagger. "Someone performed the ritual last night," he said, voice cold. "Blackwood blood, stolen or given." Theodore's face was ashen. Eleanor wept silently. Clara's hands twisted. Graves's pipe trembled. Blackwood stared at the vial, his eyes haunted. "Tomorrow," Poirot declared, "we find the cloaked figure. The manor's secret is close." As they scattered, he lingered, the locked door's hum vibrating in his bones. The altar had tasted blood, and Poirot feared the price of its hunger. Chapter 8. The Cloaked Figure. The dawn broke over Blackwood Manor with a chill that seeped into the bones, the fog outside swirling like a living thing against the windows. Hercule Poirot stood in the East Wing corridor, the empty vial with its crescent symbol in his pocket, its presence a silent accusation. The cloaked figure he'd glimpsed at the attic altar haunted his thoughts, their swift escape through a hidden passage fueling his resolve. The tablet's glow, the voice's demand for Blackwood blood, and the altar's fresh stain pointed to a ritual in motion. Today, he would unmask the figure and uncover their intent. "The game tightens," he murmured, twirling his moustache, "and Poirot does not lose." He began by mapping the attic's side passage, enlisting Jenkins to guide him through the manor's labyrinthine underbelly. The butler, pale and hesitant, led him to a narrow corridor behind the attic, its walls rough stone, barely wide enough for a man. Dust lay undisturbed, but a faint scuff mark caught Poirot's eye. A boot print, small, recent. "Someone knows this path," he said, tracing the mark with his cane. Jenkins shook his head, claiming no one used these tunnels since the servants' days. Poirot noted the butler's trembling hands and pressed. "You saw the figure, no? Last night?" Jenkins stammered, denying it, but his eyes flicked to the east wing, betraying fear. Poirot next sought Clara Voss, found in the library, cataloguing books with mechanical precision. "The cloaked figure," he said, showing the vial. "You know these passages, mademoiselle? Were you in the attic?" Clara's pen froze, ink blotting the page. "I was in my room," she said, voice tight. "I don't sneak about at night." But her sketchbook, left open, held a drawing of the altar, the vial's crescent symbol sketched beside it. "A memory?" Poirot asked, pointing. Clara flushed, claiming it was from Elias's journal. Her evasion sharpened his suspicions. Theodore was in the conservatory, pruning roses with a distracted air. His palm, still scabbed, twitched when Poirot mentioned the figure. "Cloaks and daggers? Sounds like a bad novel," he scoffed. but his eyes darted to the manor's upper floors. Poirot held up the vial. "This was used last night. Your blood, perhaps?" Theodore's laugh was brittle. "I'm not bleeding for grandfather's ghosts." Yet Poirot noticed a cloak folded in the corner, its hem dusty, as if recently worn. Lady Eleanor was in the parlour, stitching a sampler, her needle unsteady. "A cloaked figure," she whispered when Poirot described the attic scene. "I saw someone like that weeks ago near the east wing at dusk." Her voice trembled, and she admitted hearing footsteps in the passages behind her bedroom walls. "I thought it was my imagination," she said, eyes wide. Poirot pressed. "Did you recognize them?" She shook her head, but her fingers crushed the fabric, suggesting more than fear. Dr. Graves, in his study, was packing medical supplies, his movements brusque. "A figure in a cloak," he grunted, dismissing it. "Probably Jenkins, skulking about." But when Poirot showed the vial, Graves's hand paused on a scalpel. "That's not mine," he said too quickly. Poirot noted the doctor's cloak, hanging by the door, its fabric matching the one in the conservatory. "You know the manor's secrets, Doctor," Poirot said. Graves turned away, muttering about patience. By noon, Poirot explored the side passage again, lantern in hand. It led to a junction, one path to the servants' quarters, another to the east wing's upper floors. A scrap of fabric caught on, a nail, black wool torn from a cloak. He pocketed it, his mind racing. The figure was no phantom. They knew the manor's hidden ways and the ritual's demands. He returned to the attic, examining the altar. The bloodstain was dry now, but a faint outline in the dust suggested the vial had been placed there deliberately, not dropped in flight. At dinner, the household was tense, silverware clinking like warnings. Poirot watched. Clara's eyes avoided, the vial on the table. Theodore's hand stayed in his pocket. Eleanor's gaze darted to the windows. Graves ate sparingly. Blackwood, silent, stared at the east wing's archway. After, Poirot confronted Lord Blackwood in his study. "The figure moves with purpose," he said, showing the fabric scrap. "Someone in your household seeks to finish Elias's ritual." Blackwood's face darkened. "If it's Theodore, he's a fool," he said, but his hand lingered on the locked drawer, as if guarding a secret. At midnight, Poirot stationed himself in the attic, hidden behind the rocking horse. Lantern dimmed. The noises from the locked door below surged. Thuds, wails, a chant like a pulse. The trapdoor creaked, and a cloaked figure emerged, moving to the altar. They held a new vial, its contents dark, and poured it into the spiral groove. The tablet, left in the corridor below, hummed through the floorboards. Poirot stepped forward, voice sharp. "Enough! Reveal yourself!" The figure spun, hood falling, revealing Clara Voss, her face pale, eyes wild. "It's not what you think," she gasped, dropping the vial. It shattered, blood seeping into the stone. Poirot seized her arm, guiding her to the corridor. "Explain, mademoiselle." Clara's voice shook. "I found the ritual in Elias's journal. It said Blackwood blood could end the curse, not free. I took Theodore's blood from a cut he didn't notice." She admitted sneaking into the attic, hoping to seal the guardian forever. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the passages, the cloak." Clara confessed knowing the tunnels from childhood games, using them to avoid detection, but her story felt incomplete. Chapter 9. The Ritual's Edge. The morning light pierced Blackwood Manor's gloom, casting jagged shadows across the east wing corridor where Hercule Poirot stood, the black stone tablet under his arm and the silver dagger in his hand. Clara, Voss's confession, that she'd stolen Theodore's blood to seal the Guardian, hung like a storm cloud, but her story felt incomplete, her fear too sharp. The voice's demand for Blackwood blood and the altar's fresh stains pointed to a ritual teetering on completion. Today, Poirot would oversee the blood offering himself, ensuring no shadows slipped through his grasp. "The manor tests us," he murmured, his green eyes glinting. But Poirot tests back. He began by summoning the household to the east wing, the tablet and dagger on a table beside the locked door. The air was thick, the carvings on the door seeming to pulse under the lantern's glow. "Mademoiselle Voss has acted," Poirot said, his voice cutting through their silence. "But the ritual remains unfinished. We offer Blackwood blood, willingly, now." Theodore's face reddened, his scabbed hand flexing. "You believe her nonsense?" he snapped. Eleanor clutched her shawl, eyes wide. Graves snorted, but his pipe stayed unlit. Blackwood's jaw was set, his gaze fixed on the tablet. Jenkins hovered, clutching his broom. Poirot raised the dagger. "Who will give a drop?" Lord Blackwood stepped forward, rolling up his sleeve. "If it ends this, I'll do it." Poirot nodded, pricking Blackwood's finger with the dagger's tip, catching a drop in the silver basin. He smeared it on the door's keyhole, reciting the chant's rhythm from memory. The carvings glowed. Briefly, a low hum vibrating through the wood, but the lock held fast. A wail echoed from within. Sharp, female. "Not enough!" The household flinched, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The ritual demands more," he said, "or the wrong blood." He turned to Theodore, whose defiance crumbled under scrutiny. "Your cuts, monsieur," Poirot said, pointing to his hand. "They match the altar's stains." Theodore stammered, "I told you, accidents." But Poirot pressed. "You were seen in the east wing near the passages." Eleanor gasped, "Theodore, tell him." The young man slumped, admitting he'd cut himself on a broken glass in the attic, exploring out of boredom. "Clara must have taken it," he muttered, glaring at her. Clara's eyes dropped, confirming her theft. Poirot moved to the attic, the household trailing reluctantly. The altar's spiral groove gleamed, the bloodstain now dry but darker, as if fed again. He examined the dagger, noting its blade bore fresh scratches, as if used to carve something new. "Someone continues the ritual," he said, scanning their faces. Graves coughed. Preposterous. But Poirot caught his glance at the tablet, now humming faintly on the table below. He sent Jenkins to fetch Alistair Finch, who arrived with a leather-bound book on blood rites. "The ritual needs intent," Finch said, tracing the altar's groove. "Blackwood blood, given freely, by one who believes." Poirot tested Eleanor next in the drawing-room, away from the others. "Madame, you know the manor's history. Will you offer?" She hesitated, then nodded, wincing as the dagger pricked her finger. Poirot carried the drop to the altar, pouring it into the groove. The tablet hummed louder, the air growing heavy, but the door below stayed silent. "Belief," Poirot muttered, recalling Finch's words. Eleanor's fear was real, but her faith in the ritual seemed thin. Graves was last, cornered in his study. "I'm no Blackwood," he protested, but Poirot insisted, citing the vial's crescent symbol. Graves relented, offering a drop with a scowl. At the altar, the blood had no effect. The tablet's hum unchanged. Poirot's suspicions deepened. Graves's knowledge of the symbols, his hidden journal, suggested more than skepticism. He returned to the corridor, finding Clara alone, staring at the door. "You tried again, mademoiselle?" he asked. She shook her head. Chapter 10. The Truth. Behind the locked door. The sharp crack of glass from the conservatory still echoed in Hercule Poirot's mind as he stood in Blackwood Manor's library, the jade statue's dragon eyes glinting under the lamplight. The fog outside had begun to thin, but the air inside was thick with dread. The weight of Dr. Felix Morrow's murder pressing on the guests, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, Lady Beatrice Harlowe, Theodore Lang, and Julian Blackwood. Captain Hastings clutched his revolver, while Inspector Reed held the latest note. The truth lies in the shadows. The statue, found intact in the conservatory's chest, was the key to the deadly pact. Its stolen origins, a secret worth. Killing for. Poirot's little grey cells raced, connecting the lotus cigarette, the jade shards, the threatening letters, and the key to a hidden truth. Poirot addressed the group, his voice steady but piercing. "Mes amis, the killer has woven a web of clues, jade dust, lotus symbols, notes, to mislead us. But the truth lurks behind a locked door, one we shall now open." His eyes settled on the tiny key found under the stairs, its purpose still unresolved. "Inspector, we must search Mrs. Poole's room. The lockbox there holds the final piece." Reed nodded, signalling the constable to guard the guests. Poirot, Hastings, and Reed hurried to the staff quarters, where Mrs. Poole's sparse room revealed a small iron lockbox beneath her bed. The key fit perfectly, the lid creaking open to reveal a fountain pen with a lotus emblem and a bundle of papers. Dr. Morrow's missing journal pages. One entry read, "The statue's theft was no accident. Eleanor knew the temple's guardians. She betrayed them for profit." Another page named Mrs. Vance as the pact's mastermind, her charm masking a ruthless greed. Hastings gasped. "Mrs. Vance? She's been playing innocent all along." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Oui, mon ami. She orchestrated the pact, using Chen as a scapegoat. But Dr. Morrow's discovery threatened her. She killed to silence him, planting clues to frame others." Back in the library, Poirot confronted the group, holding the journal pages aloft. "Madame Vance, you are the shadow behind the locked door. The jade statue, stolen from a Singapore temple, was your scheme. You used your locket's photo to feign sentiment, but it was a reminder of your control over Chen. The brass button, the jade dust, the notes. All your work to deflect suspicion." Mrs. Vance's face hardened, her emerald ring glinting as she stood. "Nonsense, Poirot! You've no proof!" Poirot produced the pen, its ink matching the notes. "This pen, found in Mrs. Poole's lockbox, was stolen from you to cast blame, but your handwriting betrays you. The flourish on the Y matches perfectly. You shot Dr. Morrow with Lady Beatrice's pistol, taken during her conservatory stroll, and scattered jade fragments to sow chaos." Lady Beatrice gasped. "My pistol! Eleanor, how could you?" Theodore Lang's voice trembled. "She pushed us into the pact, said it was safe. But Felix's questions, she feared he'd ruin everything." Julian's eyes blazed. "You killed him to protect your fortune, didn't you?" Mrs. Vance laughed, cold and sharp. "Felix was a fool digging. Into old sins. The statue's worth millions, and I wasn't about to lose it. You all profited. Don't pretend you're innocent. Reed stepped forward, cuffs ready. Eleanor Vance, you're under arrest for murder and conspiracy. As the constable led her away, Sir Reginald's voice was hollow. All this for greed. Poirot's gaze softened. Non, Sir Reginald. For a truth she could not lock away. The pact bound you, but her betrayal broke it. The statue stood on the table, its curse dispelled by sunlight now piercing the fog. Hastings sighed. It's over, Poirot. But what a cost? The detective nodded, his eyes on the manor's walls. The locked door is open, mon ami, and the truth has set us free, though its price is heavy.